Vic Vogel. I'll be with you shortly. Hello, this is Coffee with Vic, and I'm your host, Vic Vogel. I want to welcome you to the show. Today, we're going to try to get a really basic understanding of socialism as it relates to the current playlist program I have going on capitalism and socialism to help everyone sort of get an understanding of those two concepts and what's going on with them relative to us in America and the rest of the world. So let's get started. First of all, socialism's greatest virtue is equality for people. Its greatest failing is lack of innovation. Socialism actually focuses on equality. Socialism is concerned about eliminating class differences. It cares about those who are disadvantaged in some way, shape, or form. Socialism works towards bettering everyone's life as much as possible and is a system where everyone owns production equally. The money, the services, the labor that goes into generating the wealth, it's all shared equally. Socialism encourages people to work harder to obtain more only after the shares have been distributed equally. So in some socialistic environments, and you'll see there are more than one kind of socialism out there later, sometimes you can be encouraged to get a little more, but it's not going to be the same thing as capitalism. Socialists believe that people are basically cooperative and caring. Now, when it comes to government, socialism's capital and production are owned and managed by government to benefit all. Socialism is at its best in a democratic government. Socialism works as long as those leading the government adhere to the ethical and moral standards that are focused on equality and fairness. If government leaders are unethical and immoral, then you can expect chaos. Government's role in socialism is to ensure that capital and services are provided equal and fairly. They're distributed, so it's a central government control. Government is responsible for providing the general welfare, protection, and security for all people of all classes, of all religions. It's pretty interesting. Now, the pros of socialism are wealth, medical care, and services are all distributed equally across people, regardless of their economic status, and it's normally free. There's no cost associated for it. Socialism focuses on helping those who are disadvantaged. So if for some reason your contribution to the society, you can't contribute as much as other people, there's an understanding that that might be something that's physically or financially or class status oriented, like you don't have the ability to obtain education. So socialism tries to help balance all of that out so these people are not disadvantaged against others. The desire to achieve self-wealth is reduced because most everything that is needed to live a comfortable life is provided by the government or the central control. So you don't want for anything. There are some things you may think you would like to have, but you don't necessarily have to have them to live comfortably and enjoy your life. But in some socialistic societies, there's a balance that allows you to obtain a little more if you choose to order or select something different than somebody else chooses. So there is some variety in socialism. There is opportunity for those who wish to achieve more after capital, services, and labor have been distributed equally based on the desire of the person to contribute more. So you have to work it a little harder. It's just not given to you. You have to work a little harder. There's less stress in society since people don't have to worry about the cost of impact of health, education, and food, etc. And you'll see that later when we look at a few of the countries. Some of those countries are actually held up as some of the most enjoyable places to live in the world. So we'll see about that in a little bit. The cons of socialism are because everyone shares equally, there is no or at least less interest in entrepreneurship, and that leads to less innovation. So new things, new products, new innovations, the idea to try something different or go faster into something new isn't necessarily encouraged strongly. It's not necessarily that it's discouraged, but it isn't encouraged as strongly. So innovation is slower to come about, if it comes about at all, because maybe some of the things that are innovated we really don't necessarily have to have. And that would be a good, interesting argument to get in debate with people who are creating artificial intelligence right now. Socialism depends on electing government leaders that create and adhere to laws that support equality and fairness. If leaders become greedy, then socialism crumbles. We're seeing that in Venezuela right now. Venezuela is a professed socialistic country. The problem is the leader has the central control leader, the president of the country, is not distributing equal. He is not adhering to ethical and fairness standards and moral standards, and consequently, people who don't have their basic needs of food and water met. They have to go out of the country to get those things provided to them and their family. So that's an example of when a leader gains control, and that's one of the dangers of socialism, is you're putting a lot of faith in the central control of those leaders. Socialism can be at a disadvantage in a world becoming more capitalistic, and that's what's going on right now. Money is king. It is power. It is now growing and growing across many countries. Socialism relies on the cooperative nature of people. When people are not cooperative and more competitive, socialism, the central governing control group, will create laws or regulations that control the competitive individuals to kind of tone them down, so that you don't have that sense of capitalism creeping into your socialistic organization. So, there are about 8 different types of socialistic organizations out there. And rather than try to paraphrase them myself, I thought the best way to do this, there was a great article by Kimberly Amadeo, I think I pronounced that right, in thebalance.com. And this is exactly from her article. So I want you to know that. There is the link to the article. And it's a great article. She does a great job of covering socialism here. So you'll want to go there and read all of this. I'm giving you a brief overview of some of it, but you want to read all of it pretty comprehensively to get a better understanding of what's going on. But there are according to a group called the Socialism by Branch that she quotes from, there are about 8 different types of socialistic societies. One is a democratic socialist. The means of productions are managed by the working people, and there is a democratically elected government. Central planning distributes common goods such as mass transit, housing, and energy, while the free market is allowed to distribute consumer goods that are goods maybe beyond what are absolutely necessary. So you could see how this might fit the United States as a definition of socialism working, at least working in the United States, maybe in conjunction with capitalism. I did a previous video you might want to look at on that in my playlist. And you'll have that available to you at the end of the show, and also it'll be in the description of this video. Then there's revolutionary socialism. Socialism will emerge only after capitalism has been destroyed, pounced upon, and just pushed out altogether. There's no peaceful road to revolutionary socialism. It has that name for a reason. It's normally an uprising or a revolution that's happening. That is happening in Sri Lanka right now, and because of that, you had this really horrible bombing. It's a religious war between two sects, and unfortunately, this is what happens when you're in a socialistic organization. When these two groups below can't seem to come together, whoever that leader is at the top, if they are favoring one over the other, then you have a real dilemma with your socialistic world. Kind of creates a revolutionary environment. Libertarian socialism assumes that the basic nature of people is rational, autonomous, and self-determining. In other words, I'm going to do the thing that's right for me because it's right. Once the restrictions or strictures of capitalism have been removed, people will naturally seek a socialist society that takes care of all, free of economic, political, and social hierarchies. And that's because they see it as in their best interest, their own self-best interest. Market socialism is production is owned by the workers. They decide how to distribute among themselves. They will sell excess production on the free market. Alternatively, it could be turned over to society, which could be distributed. They could distribute it according to the free market environment. Some cases, it's almost like I think about like Harley Davidson, where the employees bought the company and all the employees elected who they thought should run the company, and then they all decided how they would share in the profits and those kind of things. That kind of is a flavor. It's not totally, but it's a flavor of market socialism. Now, you have green socialism. This is the type of socialistic economy that highly values the maintenance of natural resources. So this is all about protecting our world and our earth, and public ownerships of green companies and how companies that produce energy and public transportation and food, etc. These are all owned by the central organization, and protection focuses on making sure everyone has enough of the basics instead of consumer products that one doesn't really need. This kind of economy guarantees a livable wage for everyone, and that you will not have to worry about having enough food, enough medical supplies, enough pharmaceuticals, whatever that might be. Which is interesting because I saw a show just the other night. I think it was called Ransom. It's about a guy who's a negotiator for kidnappers. But anyway, this one had to do with a lack of supply of insulin that happened to be poisoned. Uh, and this is the kind of thing you have to kind of be careful of when you're in these central production things. When something goes wrong, how does all that happen? Now, Christian socialism is based on the Christian principles that are stated in the Bible, the Christian Bible, about brotherhood and how to live with with each other and take care of each other. So a lot of those principles that you find in the Bible and fruit of the Spirit, etc., are the core value systems that underpin how Christian socialism would work in an environment. Utopian socialism is more of a philosophy or a vision that really didn't come into concrete fruition. It didn't become concrete plan. It rose in about the early 19th century, before the industrialization movement took place. And it actually, it would have a variety of different societies, experimental societies out there working. Then you would take the best of both and begin to merge them into what would be called the utopia, or the ideal society out there. Fabian socialism, this type of socialism, was extolled by the British organization in the late 1900s, and it advocated a social change to socialism. through laws, elections, and other peaceful means. Now, here are some of the countries that deal with socialism. First of all, there are no 100% socialistic countries out there. Socialism in its purest form would be extremely hard to have unless you just isolated totally from everybody else in the world, and that's not how we live on this planet. So you're not going to have 100% socialistic. I think you can move towards an ideal, but to one scale, but it won't be 100%. Here are some examples of socialistic countries with capitalism mixed in: Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and you could probably add the United States to that, because our government is a central control government that takes in taxes and redistributes that money and has a lot of those basic principles: helping the poor, making sure people are provided a basic living and income. But at the same time, they have that capitalistic bent of free market society out there. Okay, examples of countries mixed with communism are Cuba, China, North Korea, Russia, and Vietnam, and you could pretty much understand that. Some countries that profess a socialistic government are Algeria, Angola, India, Portugal, and Sri Lanka. I was just explaining that that's a real example of where things can go wrong in a socialistic environment, and how devastating that can be, depending on the leadership of that government. We'll see how that goes. But a lot of those countries are in flux and have difficulty managing their countries. So you can see socialism is not an easy, and the closer it gets to pure socialism, it's not an easy system to keep in place given human nature, so to speak. And here are some countries that are capitalistic but have strong social. They're capitalistic, but they have strong socialist parties in their government: Ireland, France, Great Britain, Netherlands, New England, Belgium, and this is where we would say the United States probably falls into. These countries actually have voting members who are socialist in their orientation within their government organizations. So you can see how these happened. We see that the Netherlands, New Zealand, Belgium, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, those European countries, you can see the capitalism and socialism began in Europe, and you can see that the countries that sort of split and went each way, like Norway, Sweden, Denmark, are actually listed as some of the better countries in the world to live today. So there you have it. So there's some pros and cons of socialism, some understanding about socialism, and you can get an idea of some of the countries in the world that are socialistic to some extent, even though they may not be 100% socialistic, and those that are mixed with other forms of government philosophy. So there you have it. Here is the overview based on what I'm gathering from what I've done some research on here. Socialism focuses on equality and fairness. That's pretty fair. Socialism is concerned about the welfare of all, regardless of their class status. And that separates it pretty strongly from capitalism. Capitalism's primary focus is the single person gaining as much wealth and controlling it as possible. That's why you have large class differences in the United States and Great Britain and other countries that have a more capitalistic society. France is experiencing that horrible aspect right now. Socialism works to break down financial class differences. And so even though you may not get to 100%, if you can integrate a socialistic environment or philosophy with a capitalistic free market society, and you should be able to do those, again, it kind of depends on who's leading that government. Socialism is centrally controlled and requires ethical and moral leaders to manage fairness and equality. This is probably the biggest dilemma facing socialist countries today, is finding somebody in there who truly is someone who is not greedy, doesn't get hung up in their power and their control of a centralized government. You cannot have a greedy, unethical, immoral person leading a socialistic society and it survive as a socialistic society. It will normally turn into a revolutionary environment if these people become greedy. We see that in Venezuela. It looks like we're seeing it in Sri Lanka, where we have two different religious sects that are warring over what this equality should look like, which is the issue there. Innovation and entrepreneurship suffers during socialism, and that's one of the disadvantages in the world is turning more capitalistic. You can lose your leadership role out there in the world if you're not careful. Overall, general welfare for all improves under socialism or elements of socialism in a government. And so balance between capitalism and socialism probably is a good form of government that we should have our lawmakers focused on, and not just defending their own perspective, but something that combines a little bit of both. Currently, that's the way we operate. It depends, once again, who sits in that leadership role. And we're going to have a video on just that aspect. That'll be the last video coming up in the series. Does capitalism or socialism destroy character? And it really is kind of interesting that all of this doesn't boil down to either capitalism or socialism. It boils down to character of your leader.
I'd like you to take the time to visit my YouTube channel, and while you're there, please subscribe to the channel. The link is below and will be posted in descriptions. And while you're there, go ahead and click on this bell for notifications to let you know when new shows will start.
Okay, thanks for joining me. This has been Coffee with Vic. I'm your host, Vic Vogel. Thanks for joining me. Enjoy your coffee and have a great day.